I think for fans of the franchise, the biggest thing by far is that Linda's returning. You know, she chose not to do any more Terminator films after the second one with Jim, and the fact that she's coming back was the big reason to do this, I think. As a fan of the original films and the franchise in general, I can separate myself enough to say, well, how would I feel if I heard the news that Terminator 6 was happening? And as a nerd, I would go, well, why the fuck do we need a sixth Terminator film? But then when I hear, well, because Linda's coming back and we're going to finish the story of Sarah Connor that we started in the second movie, that's a reason to show up for me. And as a director, not a fan, that's a reason to make the movie, to finish her story with her in that role, not someone else. No offense to other actors who have played her in other films, but you know, there's only one Sarah Connor, and it is Linda Hamilton. So that's why everybody should be excited about this movie. This film is a direct successor to the other Terminator films, but really because it's Linda. But it happens, aside from a few flashbacks, it happens in current day. So we treat it as if it was real time, where that happened in 1997-ish, and this one happens in 2019. And we reference the journey that Linda's had in between those films. We don't treat it as if, you know, she's the same woman, some water's passed under the bridge, and we attempt to explain sort of what the events at the end of Terminator 2 how they changed the future, how that future was changed, and what's become of that. Let's just say it didn't exactly turn out the way Sarah Connor thought it might at the end of Terminator 2, which was very hopeful. This shows the consequences of those decisions, and I think the kind of inexorable trends of fate, where we're headed with AI, what that means to humanity, and what Sarah's decision to change the future at the end of T2 has done to this this new future. This is a direct sequel to Terminator 2. This continues the story of John and Sarah Connor, and also Arnold, although in a different way, because obviously his character dies at the end of Terminator 2. This Arnold is a new Arnold. It's not the same Arnold that was there, although if you know the lore, you know that there were many of him made. We see one in Terminator 1 that dies. We see one in Terminator 2 that dies, and this is a new Arnold. But it's the same model, and it behaves the same way, although given the time span that's passed, he becomes a different, maybe person's not the right word. He becomes a different entity in our film. So it really is the continuation of that character, although in a very different way. And it is a direct continuation of Linda, and we examine the outcomes of the decisions she made at the end of Terminator 2. But the central premise that we operate from is that Judgment Day is inevitable. The rise of AI is inevitable. So even though Sarah took a stab at changing all that and fixing it, she really can't. What she did was just kick the can down the road. And in fact, the new future is worse than the old future was. I think the things that make a Terminator film, well, it's the thing that make the things that make any film great in my mind. It's character, it's character, it's character. I like a good action film as much as anybody else, but if I don't care about the characters when shit starts blowing up, then I don't really care about the film. And what Jim did so well, what other directors do less well, is perhaps you place the emphasis on spectacle versus character. And not that Jim's movies lack spectacle, because they don't, but he really makes you care about the characters before all that crazy shit starts happening. So to me, that's why I like all films, action films that do that, but Jim is particularly good at those little details, those little things that make you feel the characters are real people going through extraordinary events. I think the most important reason for Jim to come back to the franchise is Well, there's two very important reasons. One, because he knows the material like nobody else, and he's got the kind of mind that he's been thinking about it for 20 years, even though he's not making the movie, even though he never planned to make the movie. He's got all these leftover thoughts from the first experience, but also those thoughts have continued to evolve as AI has continued to evolve, as his thinking about characters and his own career has evolved. So there's a lot of good ideas and interesting observations about the movie that come from that level of connection that Jim had. Secondly, you know, he's fucking Jim Cameron, so he's one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet. And then lastly, I think it's important to the fans. Linda coming back is a huge one, to make fans feel like this is going to be different. It's going to be a return to form. Working with Linda was fantastic. Not only is she a consummate professional, and she comes to the set prepared every fucking day. She wants to do all of her stunts. She, you know, if it's physically possible to do, Linda is like, you know, put me in, coach, I want to do it. She really cares about the totality of her performance. And she's just got a great attitude. She was a great collaborator with Natalia and Mackenzie, and everybody just got along great. It was quite a family. Arnold kind of knows this character so much so that when he comes, he's like, just what would you like me to do? He's very like straightforward about it, but at the same time, he's a lot of fun to work with, and he certainly has an opinion on all of that. You know, before he came to set, all we'd heard, I'd met him a few times here in LA, always seemed like a great guy. But all we heard from his team was he just likes to have a good time, just likes to get along, just likes a happy set, and we had a very happy set. So when he comes there with his guys, they're all really funny, really great group of guys that hang out with him. It's just a really great atmosphere, and so that the whole behind the camera atmosphere with all the actors was really terrific. But he's very focused when it comes time to do it. Well, people love action films. That translates pretty well, and Arnold's the king of action films. But you know, I got to tell you, I think about it, and I wish somebody would do a scientific study on why some people on camera it's just Arnold in person is impressive, but Arnold on camera is magic, and I can't explain why that charisma is. Where the best actors have this undeniable presence when they're on camera, and Arnold is just one of those guys. For me, you always have to remember that you're making a movie where he's going up against normal humans for the most part who have conventional weapons. So if you give him too many sci-fi weapons, I feel the film becomes ungrounded. I feel if you give him too many abilities, it just becomes of like, what can he do? There's no stakes in it. So I wanted to be very regimented about what he could do and what he couldn't. I didn't want him to have energy weapons shooting out of his ass or all these other kind of crazy things, because it just becomes unbelievable that our heroes keep escaping if he's too powerful. So somewhere along the line, I can't even remember whose idea it was or where it came from, but it was, what if it was essentially the combination of a T-1000 and the T-800, the endoskeleton. But this feels very much like a grounded, independent movie that has fantastic elements, but it really feels like real people in fantastic events. It's really approached with the idea of what if this thing happened to real people, and I think that resonates in a way that a movie that a James Bond movie can't, or a way that a superhero movie can't, because it feels much more grounded and about real people. And I think within that, you put these amazing fucking, if I do say so myself, big action set pieces that everybody loves. That everybody likes the holy shit, what's going to happen next, of these big set pieces, and you have a pretty great time at the theater. The thing that's most interesting about this whole exercise to me is that we get to continue the story of the first two films with the same characters, the same actors who made those films so great, and with the same director, although in a producer role. So Linda as Sarah, Arnold as the T-800, and Jim back in the producing chair to guide the film has made it, I think, something that differentiates it from the other films, and something that will ultimately, I hope, make it a great experience for the fans. We also get to bring this whole new cast of characters to the story that is great, that will make it more interesting for the future and for new fans coming to the franchise. They're all fantastic. I cannot wait for people to see them.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey!